Hello everyone, it is Sunday the 1st of July. Summer is very much with us at the moment. Welcome to my podcast. Welcome if you're a new viewer, viewing for the first time. Welcome back if you're a regular viewer and subscriber. It's always nice to be spending some time with you again. My name is Gerard, or Peter, or Boniface. I am a former monk and a former bus driver. I spin and weave and knit and sew and do all kinds of things fibre related, and crochet, of course. I live with my two cats, Toby and Bunty. Toby is just about to make an appearance. There we go. In a small town, Abingdon-on-Thames, in the south of Oxfordshire, in the south of England. And that's pretty much it, really, isn't it, Toby? Yes, it is. So, as I say, welcome to this podcast on this summer's afternoon. Actually, it's about midday. No, sorry, it's about 2 o'clock. I thought it said 11:51. It's 13:51. It's very, very warm. It's been very warm for the last week or so, really, which is very nice. Very summery. It's not been too hot at night time, so we've been able to get some sleep at night, which is good. We are overdue some rainfall, though. The grass is now looking very brown, and the tops of the trees are looking very brown and wilted as well. So we are predicted to be getting some thunderstorms coming up from the southwest today and tonight in particular. So here's hoping it brings slightly fresher weather. We're currently enjoying temperatures of around 30 degrees Celsius, which is the low 80s Fahrenheit, which is a bit too warm, really. Somewhere in the mid-20s would be much more endurable, particularly for just going out. The sun is very hot when you go out in it, so it can be a little bit daunting. But, you know, there we are, and that's what it is. Yes, Toby, are you off now? Good. Excellent. So this has been a slightly peculiar week in terms of what I've been up to. I haven't really done that much of my usual work because I've really been working on the knitting machine. So I think I will talk about that almost exclusively in this episode. I showed you the scarf I completed last week. I have it here, in fact, just off. I haven't yet. I just haven't got around to finishing it off properly. But this is the scarf that I knit as a kind of first run, which I'm very pleased with. And I love the colours. They really bounce off each other and make it look really quite attractive as a scarf. But I wanted to have a more formal approach to learning how to use the knitting machine. So I want to see whether or not it's something I enjoy, and I wanted to see whether or not it was something that I could use as in the larger part of my crafting life. One of the biggest problems I've found, actually, is just finding patterns for knitting machines. Most knitting patterns are for hand knitters, and it's not always simply a case of transferring that directly to the knitting machine. Tension is often very different on the machine from hand knits, and it's a bit. It's quite easy to adjust the tension so that you can increase or decrease the number of stitches in the row, but it's very difficult to actually increase or decrease the size of the needles so that there are the same number of rows in the swatch that you're creating. So for things like garments where you're doing shaping at the tops of the front and back, it's important to know how many rows you're doing, and yes, to some extent you can knit the bottom part of the body just as long as you need it, but you need to get the proportions right. So when you're doing your decreasing for the neck and the sleeves, you have to be able to know what the overall length is going to be in terms of the number of rows in order to space those decreases properly, so that it doesn't look suddenly going in and then continuing and then suddenly going in. Anyway, so that was my intention. I wanted to understand the knitting machine process more. So I went online and I found on Amazon mid-gauge basics and much more, which is basic techniques for the LK150, which is the machine I have. But the same lessons are transferable to all mid-gauge and bulky machines because they all basically work in the same way. It has patterns, row by row instructions, and there's a progression through the book of learning new techniques for each of the new things that you make. It's a very good book. I want to say that first of all, and this is by Charlene Schaeffer. Schaeffer? It's very difficult to see when it's blue on blue. I think it's Schaeffer, yes, Charlene Schaeffer. And it's knickknackshop.com is her website. But I got this book through Amazon, as I say, so it wasn't very expensive, and I thought as a first test. And these are the projects that she takes you through on the back page. So I thought I would have a look at this, and it is a very good book. There are one or two places where I don't think it's as clear to me as the reader as it probably was to her as the writer. I kind of sort of worked it out, what she was saying, but it wasn't. They're not always abundantly clear exactly what she means, but you know, broadly speaking, it's not bad at all. And so I've read through the kind of instructions on how to cast on, how to bind off, the different types of cast on, the different types of bind off, what the different settings on the carriage mean, because sometimes you want to leave things in hold and sometimes you want to slip stitch rather than knit using the various settings. So it's all quite useful to learn that stuff. And then I started with lesson number 1, which was the stocking hat. Now, the picture that she uses is the one that I actually made. The instructions that she provides in this pattern are actually for a plain knit hat, but she then provides a second set of instructions for the stripe. So the stripe hat is what I decided to make, and here it is. And she used a single colour pom-pom. I made a multicolour pom-pom to go on top. The whole thing is made from, get it? The essential DK from West Yorkshire Spinners, which is a 75% wool, 25% nylon. They don't say what type of wool. And I made it in this lavender and magenta. I always keep the bands over there. I made it in this lavender and magenta. The way in which the hat is made is actually quite a long hat because it's got a lining, as it were, on the inside. So this is actually the cast on row, this purple edge here. And then you knit the whole purple inside. Then, I'm calling it magenta, which is purple. And then up here, where you then fold the brim. So it's not a ribbed brim, but it's quite stretchy all the same. And then it's just alternating bands of colour. I followed the instructions as they were written for the decreases in the crown, and I ended up with quite a lacy crown, which is fine, but it's not perfect for me. So I think I probably, when I make another one of these, will probably move stitches around so that the lacy element, because you basically decrease by moving a stitch from a needle onto the needle next to it, and so you end up with one gap between two needles, as it were, which then, so you create a kind of length of yarn between the two stitches, and you knit a couple of rows of that, and then you do the same thing again. So then now you've got 3 stitches, 3 needles between 2 stitches, so you end up with quite long lengths. So I think what I'll probably do is do the decrease and then move all the stitches up, which is a little bit more fiddly, but I think will just give a better result. She says she does this to reduce bulk in the crown, and I can see what she means, but ultimately I think I'd rather do it that way, because it just looks slightly odd. I mean, you have to pull the pom-pom back in order to see the crown, so it's not that it will look odd. I'll put it on, even though it's incredibly warm today. I'll put it on and you can see what it looks like. And in fact, because the band is there, it will come down over the ears if I need it to. But this is the largest size. She actually puts small, medium, large, extra large, and double extra large. I know I have a big head. The hat size I take is extra large normally, so I made the biggest one, and it fits me comfortably. So if I'm making them, as I will be for other people, then I will just make the shorter versions of it. But equally, this can be done in a plain colour. If you have a favourite football team, or your school football team colours, whatever it happens to be, this is a nice simple project to create a sports hat for standing on the touchlines in the cold winter months, as many of us have in former times. So that was the first project. In total, it probably took me 20 minutes to do the knitting for the main body, and then probably about 10 minutes to do the crown and the finishing touches. I then had to seam the hat, which I have done. I'll just have to look for the seam, which is a good sign. Yes, there's the seam. So it's done as a flat piece and then is seamed. So when going backwards a little bit, when you've got the full length of this knitting on the machine, you do a process known as hanging the hem. So you bring the cast on edge up and put it on the needle with the top edge, and then knit the crown area so that it actually sews the fabric together, and it's a double layer fabric. But as I say, you're then left with a long flat piece of fabric, and so I've seamed it using a mattress stitch down the back, which is almost invisible, which I'm very pleased about, and that goes all the way around, of course, and to the inside as well. So all in all, I'm very pleased with the way that came out, and together with the seaming and the pom-pom, that probably took an extra 20-25 minutes to do. So 45 minutes to an hour for the whole hat, really, which is incredibly quick. As I say, I've made the striped version, and there is a plain version, which are the basic rules. She also provides a chart for doing Fair Isle style hat, and gives advice on cabling to make a cabled hat. So there are other types of the same hat. Clearly the cabling in the Fair Isle will take longer to knit because there's more hand manipulation of the needles. This is just a plain knit back and forth, just changing the colour. And because I knew I was going to be seaming the hat, I didn't cut the yarn. I just buried the carry up inside the seam, so it's invisible to the naked eye, as it were. You'd have to take it apart to see where the yarn is carried up over the other rows of the colour. Yeah, so that's my first machine knitted project. So, having completed that, the following day I decided to do the second lesson, and the second lesson is the scarf, and clearly the scarf to go with the hat. So again, the instructions were very good. There were one or two little points where I would have added an extra little something in there just to make it clearer exactly what I was talking about. But overall, the instructions were very good. I did the variation again. I decided not to do the simple scarf, which would have just been a plain scarf all the way up, even though that would have been a lot quicker. So I did the variation to the basic scarf, the basic construction of the scarf was to do a flat panel, which would then be seamed around the back, making a cylinder. And then fringe would be put at the two ends, holding the two ends of the cylinder together. So there were several techniques in this. There were eyelet holes for the fringe, which were made so that the fringe could be attached at the end. And then there was the latching of the seam. So I decided to follow the actual pattern because she said you can do other processes, but this is the design that she had. And so the way in which the basic scarf is set up is that there are two stitches, one at either end, and then there's a blank needle next to them, and then there's the body of the scarf in between. And at the very end you drop the stitches, the two end stitches, and that gives you then a big loop, and you pick up 2 at a time, and you basically hook through them going across and down the scarf, and it produces this rather attractive back, which if I open it out you'll be able to see better. So it produces quite an attractive connection for the back of the scarf. The other element that she put in here was a faux rib. It's not a real rib, although it would be quite easy to make it into a real rib, but it would also be quite a long process, because with the ribbing you have to drop a line of stitches and then relatch them the other way round, as it were. And that's fine where you're doing ribbing at the bottom of a garment where there might be 5 or 6 rows of that, but a length of scarf this long would be an awful lot of latching to do, and would take a very long time. And it would still probably be quicker than knitting by hand, but it would be certainly a laborious and boring task. So what she had me do instead was to have, I think it was 4 needles and then no needle, 4 needles, no needle. And so there is actually a bar between, a longer bar between the sets of knits, but the effect it gives is a 4x1 rib, which again is a very clever design. And then the final feature of the design was to leave the center 12 needles without a stitch, and so you were getting these long horizontal bars along the middle of the, going up the middle of the scarf, and at the very end you then use a crochet hook up 4 of those, do a 360-degree twist in order to fix the first stitch, and then basically you pick up the next 4 and bring them through, then pick up the next 4 and bring them through, and you create this braid going up the scarf, which is a faux cable effectively. So some really interesting techniques. And then I just attached the fringing at the end, securing the braid and the latching at the top and the bottom with the middle one, and then having 3 on either side just to create close the gap at the top. And so it's a lovely long scarf, and because these are both wool, I mean, you can see that the colours, they are the same yarns, so they do go together very nicely. They're incredibly warm and very squishy because they're double layered, so it's a really nice little set. And there were a number of techniques there that I really enjoyed learning. The scarf took a lot longer to make. It probably only took me, I would guess probably about half an hour to actually make the length of the scarf. But then the latching of the back and the braiding of the front, and then the making of the tassels probably added another good 2 hours onto the whole project. So it's probably somewhere between 2.5 and 3 hours to make, which is still very quick, and it's a very, I do think it's a very attractive looking scarf set, which, although it's decorative, is not, I think it's unisex. I think I could see a man or a woman wearing a scarf like this. Perhaps with less fringing, I don't know, but I quite like the colours anyway. That's why I chose the colours. I am thinking of making some of these as Christmas presents for friends though, so those of you who watch this podcast, you can enjoy looking forward to that. So then on to Project 3. Well, Project 3, given that this was yesterday's 30th of June, last day of June, so I decided to make a Christmas stocking, which is the next project. And this was an interesting exercise. This was, again, learning several new techniques. So we started with the top of the stocking. And as you can see, rather like with the hat, the cast-on row is looped up to create this rollover ribbing, and is then stitched together when I start making the body of the sock. We do short rows, wraps and turns for the heel, and then the foot of the sock, and then short rows, wraps and turns for the toe as well. I followed the instructions to the letter and ended up with the seam of the toe and the foot on the outside. So now I know to do it the other way around. These are the things you learn, but there is no instruction actually in there, and it wasn't clear which way round to hang it, so I just decided to hang it back the way it had been, and that was the wrong way round. So now I know to hang it back on the other way round when done. There is a seam that goes up the side of the sock, and it's actually a lot more visible on this one. I think I got tired when I wasn't really focusing very well when I was mattress stitching this, so it's a very noticeable seam. But I think, and then I did an I-cord, and so I've learned how to do an I-cord, knitting one way and slip stitching going back, and attach that again to itself, so this is integral to the body of the stocking and so won't come unattached. Obviously it will be hung up that way round so that the seam is on the back, but it would be very easy to cut out a letter or an image and applique it onto here, and with a more advanced pattern, do a Fair Isle initial, or if indeed for those who have knitting machines with punch cards, you could easily put in a punch card design to create a character on the stocking. But even by itself, I think this is a very attractive stocking. I made this out of, and I have them here, so I wound them into cakes after I'd finished. I made this out of the Starcraft Special. It's 100% acrylic. The patterns called for a worsted weight yarn, which is the more common weight of yarn, I think, in the States. But in the UK, DK is much more common than worsted. It's actually quite difficult to get hold of a worsted weight yarn. And so I tend to use Starcraft Special, which is 100% acrylic. It's really soft acrylic. And so the green is called Kelly Green, and the white is just called white, I believe. I'll just double check that for you. Yep, it's just called white. So the white is shade 1001 and the green is shade 1826, for those of you who are interested. And I think the green and the white together are a very Christmassy colour. I didn't have a green quite like this. I had bottle greens and olive greens and spring greens, but I needed this kind of deep, richer green, which I think really works as a Christmas colour. I've also bought a skein of the lipstick red, which again, you're getting a slightly blown out version of the colour there. It's a bit darker than you're seeing on the screen, or at least I'm seeing on the screen. But again, I think the two together, oh, that's better. The shadow is more the colour that I'm getting in real life. I think the pair together will work quite well as a Christmas decoration as well, so I'll probably make another stocking in the red. So the next item on my the next item on my lesson plan is the baby cardigan. I have two babies that are due imminently, one from a friend and his wife, and another my niece and her husband. So I'm looking forward to really getting to grips with making some baby clothes. So it's a fairly simple cardigan, but I mean, what she's actually doing is taking you through the construction of garments so that you can understand the process of making garments on a machine. And so, but I think this is actually quite a pretty little cardigan for a girl. And so I've decided that I'm going to use this stardust snuggly, which is a 2-ply, so I will have to hold it double-stranded, I think, or even triple-stranded. But that won't be too difficult to do. And this is, it doesn't have a colour name, it says shade 251, so there we are. Sorry, I've got black cat hairs all over it. The disadvantage of living with black cats is that white yarn doesn't stay white. Again, it's 100% acrylic, but it's very soft and snuggly, and it will work quite nicely for the ribbing and the button band. And then I'm going to pair it with this acrylic yarn. I don't know the name of this. This was my mother's. I've got 2 or 3 cakes of this. I think they were odds and ends that she had, but together they weigh about 100 grams, so that should be plenty for a baby cardigan. Actually about 150 grams I think I've got, so that should be more than plenty for a baby cardigan. And it's got this lovely dark pink splash, so it's a kind of variegated pink, which I think will work quite nicely. So I will let you know about that next week when I'm done. I also want to make another hat and scarf set, and I think I will be using these two colours when I do that. But before I do that, there is also the next project after that, which is the slip stitch pillow. I'll show you this is the actual pattern. So it's basically the slip stitch appears on the garter face, so on what would normally be the wrong side of the work, but which becomes the right side of the work, because it basically looks as though you're doing these knit stitches and then purling between them. So one of the things that she suggests is making the slip stitch a different colour. So it's possible I'll use these two. These are the Essential DK from West Yorkshire Spinners again, in their, I suppose, bottle green and cream colourway. I've got 2 skeins of each of these, so there's more than plenty for a cushion. Or I may make a hat and scarf set. Again, I need about that quantity to make the hat and scarf together. So there we are. So that's what I'm doing. I do have another acquisition I just want to mention, because I bought quite a basic machine. I get lots of tools with it, but nowhere to actually keep the tools whilst I am working on the machine. So I popped into Abingdon and went to a charity shop, and I found this, what used to be a stationery holder, and this is absolutely the perfect size for all the different tools that I have. It's quite heavy in itself, which is good, and with all the metal weights and so on in it, it's even heavier. I also have my corkscrew in there, just because then I know where it is next time I want to open a bottle. So that sits at the back of the desk behind, and it just means all of my tools are easily accessible. I mean, I always had, my mum has stationery holders like this, but these days letters are not that common. The only letters I get, even my bills now, most of them tend to be done electronically, so I get statements and emails about things rather than printed letters, which is, I think, the way many people live now. So the use of, reusing something that was created for one purpose just fits in with my kind of philosophy on how I like to live my life, really. Reduce, reuse, recycle is the mantra. Reduce what you consume, reuse what you can, and then recycle what has to be recycled. Recycling is the least green way of living of those three, simply because it requires more energy being put into the item in order to melt it down or reform it into something else. So if you can reduce the amount you consume and also reuse what you do consume, those are the two better approaches to a green life. So that's basically it in terms of the fibre content of this week's podcast. I knew when I was talking to you last week that I was touching on an area that would be sensitive. And there has been a comment, which I know some of you will have read, which I'm disappointed by, I have to be honest, for a number of reasons. But first of all, I want to say I am truly very sorry if I have upset or offended anybody with any of the content in my podcast. It is absolutely not my intention to make anyone feel uncomfortable or upset, and I am truly sorry if anybody has been upset by anything that I've had to say. And I just wanted to say, I mean, as the person who puts together the podcast, the decision on what I actually talk about is mine and mine alone. I'm always happy to listen to suggestions about what could be included in the podcast, and of course I'm always interested in what people don't like as much as what they do like. But the decision on what I choose to talk about and how I choose to talk about it will always be mine. As a viewer of podcasts, I'm always at liberty to watch what I want to watch, not watch what I don't want to watch, or indeed not to subscribe and not to follow a particular channel. And of course, if you have a point of view that you strongly want to put across that's different from another person's, there is absolutely nothing in the world stopping you from opening your own YouTube channel. And all of these, I'm not simply saying it's mine and therefore, Yabu sucks. I'm genuinely communicating the creative process. I can't decide what other people want. I can only decide what I want to share. And if you want to listen to me sharing what I share, then, that's wonderful. And if you don't want to listen to me sharing what I share, then, that's fine as well. And there'll be somewhere else that you can go and enjoy listening to what someone has to say. And that's just the nature of YouTube. And I think, we're not all the same. We can't create a world where we only consume. Well, we can create a world where we only consume things that we like to hear, but I'm not sure that that's actually how we grow as people. Sharing other people's experiences, understanding other people's points of view is what makes us all more able to get through this weird and wacky world in which we live. And that's really, I don't want to over-labour the point. I just wanted to give some feedback that, as I said at the very beginning, I'm truly sorry if I've offended anybody. That was never my intention. It is never my intention when making these videos. And I'm not going to say any more about that subject. I'm now going to move on to talk about something far, far, far more interesting, which is this week a significant step forward in the human understanding of the universe. So for this, I need to give quite a lot of background. So please bear with me. There is a lot of no. Well, how do I start this? I could start in so many different places. I have always had a fascination with astronomy. I think if I had been better advised as a teenager when I was making options on what to do and what to study that would see me through to university, I would have chosen differently. And looking back now, I wish I had become an astrophysicist. It didn't occur to me at the time, and I wasn't properly advised at the time. I was the only person from my school to actually go to university, so it's not that surprising that the kind of support structures were not there to give the correct advice. But anyway, leaving all of that aside, I read mathematics at university, and that was fine. There is in the public mind a tension between religion and science, and some of this comes from the aggressive atheism of some scientists, and some of it comes from the aggressive anti-intellectualism of some religionists. A pox on both their houses almost, but there are problems on both sides of militant extreme positions being taken. But the vast majority of us, I think, fall somewhere in the middle, where we have a faith, but we also understand that there is a scientific world of wonder as much as a religious world of wonder around us, and that science doesn't preclude religion or God, and God and religion don't preclude science. And a good example of that is Monsignor Georges Lemaitre, who was a Belgian, I think, Jesuit priest at the end of the 19th and beginning of the 20th century. He died in the 1960s, I think. And in the 1920s, he was working as a Vatican funded astronomer. And he is the first astrophysicist, or astronomer as they were in those days, more than astrophysicists. He was the first to posit the idea of what became the Big Bang Theory. He called it the primeval atom, or the atomic the cosmic egg, sorry. And he also derived what became known as Hubble's law and Hubble's constant in 1927, 2 years before Edwin Hubble himself actually derived the same laws and constant. And for whatever reason, Hubble is the person that they're named after. I mean, Edwin Hubble was himself a great scientist, so I don't have any particular beef axe to grind on that one. It's just something interesting, because normally things are named after the first scientist to publish the idea. There are occasions, and this is one of them, when it's actually named after a more famous proponent of an idea rather than the original proposer. And he also described what we now know to be true, but he described the initial expansion of the universe. So as well as describing the idea of the singularity of the primeval atom, he also described the idea of the Big Bang, the expansion of the universe suddenly from this primeval origin. And he did so for theoretical reasons rather than observational. For when he derived Hubble's law and Hubble's constant, he was working from both theoretical reasoning and observed reality. But with the primeval atom and the expansion of the universe, he was working entirely theoretically, because the sophistication of the detection equipment of the 1920s simply wasn't good enough to allow proper observation of these aspects of the universe. That is until the 1960s, when the cosmic microwave background was first identified. And this is a uniformly spread layer of electromagnetic radiation. And it details, I'll put the image in, it's a staggering image. This is the oldest image of the beginning of the universe, and what it actually provides is a snapshot immediately after the epoch of recombination begins. And that's a very grand title, but the epoch of recombination is when electrons, which are negatively charged, and protons, which are positively charged, first bound to neutral hydrogen atoms. And this then limited the amount of thermal radiation that was absorbed by these electrons and protons, which then enabled photons to no longer be, which are the particles of light, to be scattered and effectively create a fog. So we are able to see the cosmic microwave background, which is 378,000 years after the Big Bang. Now, 378,000 years sounds like an awful long time. We can't see before that because of this kind of fog, opaque fog, caused by the unattached electrons scattering the photons in such a way that we simply can't see through that fog and beyond it. We can posit ideas of what was going on, but we can't actually physically measure it because of this, this process. And so the epoch of recombination really begins the observable universe that we can see. And let me just check where I'm up to, sorry. What this leads us towards is we can identify the hotter, denser areas where the original suns and stars would attract, under gravitational pull, attract enough mass that they could spontaneously ignite and combust and become the fireballs that we know suns and stars to be. It often comes as a surprise to people to learn that the observable universe only makes up about 5% of the entire universe. That nearly 70% of the universe is made up of I mean, it's about 68% of the universe is made up of something called dark energy. And this is uniformly spread throughout the whole of space-time, and is the reason why in the 1990s we became aware that the universe is expanding quicker and quicker as every day goes by. And that's counterintuitive, because normally with an explosion, or if you drop a pebble into the water, you get the ripples very quickly, and as they travel further and further away from the source of the explosion, or the stone being dropped, they become slower and less discernible. Absolutely the opposite is happening with the universe. It is expanding quicker and quicker and quicker. And dark energy has to be causing this, because we know that observable energy isn't. And equally, there is also about 28% of the universe is made up of something called dark matter. And we know dark matter is there because of the gravitational effect it has on the actual matter that we can see, and light travelling from other galaxies that is bent by this dark matter. But the dark matter and dark energy themselves do not interact with photons, electrons, protons in any measurable way. Very, very occasionally it might be possible. Sorry, somebody's outside doing some gardening, so I'm afraid I'm going to have to speak over them, because I'm getting caught up in what I'm talking about. But the dark matter and the dark energy can't be observed, so scientists are having to really work very hard to work out ways in which to measure and observe and to predict the behaviours of something that isn't actually interacting with any part of our physical universe. And so the physical universe that we live in, that we see and can observe and interact with, where light either is emitted or is reflected from objects like the sun, like the stars and the planets and us and the buildings around us and everything else, this is something called baryonic matter. The reasons are not particularly important, but it's called baryonic matter, even though it's strictly not true, because electrons are not baryonic, they're leptons. But anyway, it's called baryonic. So about 5% of the observable universe, about 5% of the universe is observable directly and is baryonic. But all of the galaxies that in the sky that we can see only make up about 70% of this 5%. So there's 2% of the universe, physical universe, that we can see and measure that we can't see. Until this week, for the first time, an international group using the European Space Agency's XMM Newton space X-ray telescope, I think it was called, X-ray observatory, sorry. So this is detecting light at the far end of the spectrum, the X-ray spectrum. And they were looking at what they call a whim. So a whim is a warm-hot intergalactic medium. This is what it's defined as. It's a hot, diffused gas that exists between galaxies. So it's not part of a solar system, it's not part of a galaxy, it's in the intergalactic space-time that we can see between galaxies. And because it's between galaxies, it's virtually invisible, unless it is backlit by something else. Now, the something else in this instance is something called a quasar. And a quasar is scientists believe, and there is some evidence, a lot of evidence, to support the idea that at the centre of every galaxy is a supermassive black hole. And they actually have a proper name. I may have written it down somewhere. Have I? They call it the supermassive central black hole, sorry. So it's at the very centre of every galaxy is this supermassive central black hole. And they're usually surrounded by millions or billions of stars. like our own in the Milky Way. And when they're not surrounded by stars that have... stars themselves usually form, as I say, by large collections of gas being pulled in on itself and collapsing in on itself, and so igniting and then combusting. Usually hydrogen, which combusts into helium and then sinks back down and becomes hydrogen again through the processes in the stars. And that's a not very particularly descriptive description of a star, but anyway, go with me on this one. Our own star is used as the kind of base measure for what is the unit of measurement called the solar mass. So our sun is 2 nonillion kilograms. So that is 2 followed by 27 zeros of kilograms of mostly hydrogen and helium. And poles are about the size of 1 million or 1 billion solar masses. So 1 million or 1 billion suns making up this black hole. So it's a super dense, super heavy black hole, which provides the gravitational pull to keep all these star systems revolving around the galactic center. But where the gas doesn't actually ignite, collapse in on itself and ignite and become a sun, you get these supermassive black holes which have the same density and the same amount of energy in them, but they become what's known as a quasar, and they emit so much radiation and heat and energy as they collapse and combust that they can provide more light than, say, the Milky Way, which is a collection of billions of stars. So if you can backlight the intergalactic space with a quasar, then it's possible to see one of these WHIMs, these warm, hot intergalactic mediums. And this is what's happened last week. This team of scientists were able to see just this glimpse of the matter in the intergalactic space because of the backlight of the quasar, and this has enabled us to, or enabled them to, give a rough estimate of the amount of gas, therefore the amount of matter, and the amount of matter is roughly the missing 2%. In 2028, the European Space Agency is going to launch the Athena project, which will be a space telescope which will be able to more accurately measure these puffs of gas in the intergalactic space, so we'll know more about them and be able to say for certain whether they make up the missing baryonic matter. But at this moment in time, the scientific world is all astir because we finally found the 5%, or the missing 2%, of what we know we're able to see. So 5% down, 95% to go. Science has got lots more years of discovery ahead of it. I know that that's all been quite an involved little tour, but I just wanted to share that news because I think it's quite exciting, quite positive news. And just a couple of thoughts for you to think about. For those of you who are married or who like to wear jewellery, all of the heavier elements are only formed when a sun collapses and dies, when it turns supernova. So gold and silver and platinum are the byproducts of nuclear explosions deep in space. Our own sun is probably the 1000th generation sun, because we have quite a stable sun which is going to be around for about 15 billion years, but many suns are supermassive in themselves and so collapse and burn out very, very quickly. And as they do that, they eject all this matter into interstellar space, which then collects around a new nucleus and becomes a new sun, and then that collapses in and explodes out, and so we get this constant renewal in the universe. Sorry about the distracting noise outside, there's not a lot I can do about that. And the second thought for you, that if you want to know what an alien looks like, look in the mirror, because at least 50% of the atoms that make up you and me and the table and the sky and the door and the television and the computer that you're watching on, more than 50% of those atoms come from another galaxy, from intergalactic space. And there's a thought. There is also a third thing to think about. I've talked at the beginning of this little cogitation about the cosmic microwave background, which formed 378,000 years after the Big Bang. The universe itself being about 14 billion years old, just about 13.7 billion years old. It means that when we're looking at stars and galaxies in the far distant sky, which might be millions or even billions of light years away, and a light year is a measure of distance rather than time. It's the distance that light will travel in a vacuum in a year on Earth. A year on Earth, but obviously Earth isn't a vacuum. Which the speed of light is 186,000 miles per second, so you can imagine how far it can travel in a year. So we're talking about distances which are just almost beyond thinking, and the cosmic microwave background is 13.5 billion years old. So we are looking, in a sense, we're looking into the past as we look at these long distances away from Earth. And it's an interesting thought that long after we have died and you know, even long after humanity itself has become an extinct species, if that happens, we will still be alive in some sense, because the image of us as light bouncing off us is still travelling throughout the cosmos. That if there were someone with sensitive enough equipment somewhere else in the universe, they would be able to look back in time and see us still here and now, and they may be able to look back and be seeing the dinosaurs here and now. So it's just an interesting extra thought. I promise I will stop there. I'm beginning to sound like the Spanish Inquisition from the Pontymaithon sketch.
Our chief weapon is surprise. Surprise and fear. Fear and surprise. Our two weapons are fear and surprise.
But that's the last of these little thoughts to leave you with. I was really rather surprised this morning. I haven't been opening emails and things for the last few days for various reasons. I've just been busy with the knitting machine and seeing people and, you know, just the general lovely enjoying almost the dog days of summer. And I received notification from Hannah, who is the host of the Cozy Cottage Crochet podcast, which I really enjoy watching. And she lives down in Florida, I believe. And she had sent me a copy of 2 new patterns that she has designed, and has offered me a giveaway of a copy of each of the patterns to 2 of you watching this podcast. So she said it was entirely up to me how I wanted to do this, but I think first of all I'll just show you the lovely patterns. The first is called the Key Largo Lace Wrap. And it really is, I mean, sorry, I didn't mean to cut Hannah's head off there. She's taken this photograph and it's a really stunning wrap. I mean, I think it's really attractive. And it's, I believe, I've got it here, the materials, she's used a fingering weight yarn. So you're probably, I think, probably looking at two balls of wool to make it. She's used bamboo, in fact, as the part to get gauge. So that's the first one, and the second one is this Treasure Island shawl, which again I think is just absolutely gorgeous to look at. So I'm very grateful to Hannah. Thank you very much for giving me these and for giving me the opportunity to give you these two patterns as well. Yes, they're both made in fingering, in fact, which would make them ideal summer projects in themselves and items to wear in the summer too. So the other thing of note for my podcast this week is that we've hit 600 subscribers. So I think probably I should do the giveaway based on that fact that, you know, thank you everyone who has subscribed and who makes this whole process of recording podcasts so much fun, and knowing that there's an audience out there who like to just while away an hour in my company as I witter on a variety of subjects. So I think one of the prizes I will draw a random draw from the list of members of the group. I forgot the hand-me-downs. Sorry, I'd forgotten the name of my own podcast then. The hand-me-downs group on Ravelry, and I'll put a link in the description below. So I will draw that next Friday. Why Friday? Because it's the first day that came into my head, I think. I will draw the random prize from the list of people who are members of the group on Ravelry. The second prize, or the second copy of the whole thing, will be given to... I will open a thread in Ravelry in the group, and the question will be... I don't know, what should the question be? What you most enjoy about crafting in the summer. There we are. What you most enjoy about crafting in the summer. So those will be the two prizes. One will be from everybody and the other will be from those who make a comment in the thread. So you've got two chances of winning, and you're more likely to win, I suspect, if you actually make a comment than if you just happen to be a member of the group. But I will draw those. I will draw those Friday. I will close the thread at midday British summertime on Friday and draw the two prizes after that. So that's everything, really. So I think at that point I shall say to you, I hope you enjoy the lovely days of summer, those of you in the Northern Hemisphere like me. I hope your winters are not too cold and dark for those in the Southern Hemisphere. And until next time, stay happy, stay safe, stay well, and keep crafting. So bye for now.
We are stars.